Okay, thank you, Manisha, and thank you everyone for giving up your Saturday morning to attend this webinar about the very important topic of safeguarding. As Manisha's introduced me already, my name is Colette Bennett and I'm the Charities Engagement Manager for the Charity Commission for England and Wales. Myself and my colleague Sarah will be talking to you this morning. So just a few points to note about the webinar. We've only got really quite a relatively short time this morning and there's an awful lot to cover. So you'll see that in the slides, which we will be sharing after the webinar, that we've provided quite a lot of links and signposting to further information, further guidance and other tools and organisations where you can get help with this area. As I've said, you'll receive the slides after the session and that will include all the links that we refer to. Also in the chat, we will post a link to a survey and we'd be really grateful if towards the end of the webinar you could fill that out. It's just to let us know how we've done and how we can improve sessions like this going forward in the future. I think that's about it on the admin side, so I'm going to give you a very quick introduction to the Commission and our team and our role, and then look at what we will cover in the session this morning. I will cover some aspects and then hand over to my colleague Sarah to go into things in a bit more detail. So firstly, a bit about the Charity Commission. So as Manisha has mentioned, we are the Charity Commission for England and Wales. So Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own regulators. There will be quite a bit of similarity between sort of what we expect and what other regulators expect, but if you are a charity that is registered in Scotland or Northern Ireland, you will need to take specific advice from their guidance rather than ours. So we are the charity regulator and we have a number of strategic objectives. So that includes holding charities to account and dealing with wrongdoing and harm, if you like, our kind of more regulatory side of our work. We also inform public choice. So obviously most charities are supported by public donations, public volunteering, etc. So we have the Public Register of Charities, which details the work of all registered charities, includes things about what they do, where they do it, who the trustees are. It also shows whether they are up to date with their accounts and their reporting, which is a good sign of whether there is good governance going on. We also give charities the understanding and tools they need to succeed, and that's part of the reason why we're here today talking to you, to try and help to support you to succeed in running your Buddhist charities effectively and safely. So our team gets involved with things like this, running webinars and events to support the charity sector. So a little bit about our team then. As I said, we support charities, mainly faith charities and international ones, but one of the other things we do is we support faith charities to register. So all charities with an income of over £5,000 a year and charitable incorporated organisations, regardless of their income, must register with the Charity Commission, and that registration is done online. So if you are a Buddhist charity that's currently unregistered, or you are aware of other Buddhist charities that perhaps need to register, do signpost them to our team and we can certainly help them through that process. So help with registration and help through webinars are the main things that we do. Next slide, please. So this is our team. We're quite small, but we do cover the whole of England and Wales. So we're headed up by Eleanor Morgan, Head of Charities Engagement. Then there's myself, Charities Engagement Manager. A lot of the work is carried out by our two Charities Engagement Officers, Rosalind Hunter and Sarah, who's going to be speaking to you shortly. We're also supported by Kelly Murphy, who's our Administrative Officer. As I said, we work with faith charities, we also work with international charities and to a lesser extent education charities, providing outreach support. So now you know who we are and what we do, let's move on to the main topic of the day, which is safeguarding. So in the session today, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to look at your duties as trustees with regard to safeguarding and the need to identify and manage safeguarding risks. Sarah will talk to you about what happens from the Commission perspective when those risks are not managed well and things go wrong. And then how you can reduce the risks through having proper policies and procedures. She'll also talk about vetting processes, how you vet potential staff, trustees and volunteers, and finally what to do if, despite having those things in place, an incident still happens and you need to report those incidents, who to report them, how to do that. So first of all, we'll look then at trustee duties. So just to be clear, so we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about, let's talk about who trustees actually are. Who do we mean? So trustees are the people who have overall legal responsibility for a charity. The law describes charity trustees as the persons having the general control and management of the administration of a charity, and that's set out in the Charities Act 2011. You may hear of other types of trustees, such as holding trustees, who have a role in holding property for unincorporated charities. But when we're talking about trustees today, and more generally, it's this definition that we're referring to. So the people who are accountable and who make the decisions. So what are trustees' duties when it comes to safeguarding? This is a quote from some of our guidance. So it says, as part of fulfilling your trustee duties, you must take reasonable steps to protect from harm people, and that's all adults and children, who come into contact with your charity. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see we have a link to our essential guidance for trustees on their duties, and that's on all their duties, not just their safeguarding duties. But for the Commission, safeguarding is much wider than just safeguarding children and vulnerable adults, which is what people often think it refers to. As our guidance state, it is in its widest sense about protecting all people who come into contact with your charity. And this includes people who benefit from your charity's work, your staff if you have them, volunteers, and other people who come into contact with your charity through its work. So it's therefore really important that trustees promote an open and positive culture and ensure that everybody involved in your charity feels able and comfortable to report concerns, confident that they will be heard and that they'll be responded to. Trustees are expected to take responsibility for preventing things from going wrong, and where they do, for dealing with them and putting them right if possible. And just to clarify, the Commission is not a nominated safeguarding body with the power to implement safeguarding legislation. So we will refer concerns to relevant safeguarding agencies where that's needed to take further action. But we do look at safeguarding with regard to its breaches of charity law, and we will always take it back to those key trustees' duties and whether they've been met. So trustees are ultimately responsible. Next slide, please. What are they ultimately responsible for? So the trustees are responsible for governing the charity and making decisions about how it should be run, and that includes with regard to safeguarding. And it's very important to realise that trustees must make decisions solely in the charity's interests. So they shouldn't allow their judgment to be swayed by personal prejudices, irrelevant information, dominant personalities, or, for example, Buddhist spiritual leaders. Charity decisions must be made by the trustees and by the charity trustees only. The Charity Commission will hold trustees to account if things go wrong, and we will check that trustees follow the Charity Commission's safeguarding guidance and the law. That's not to say that you can't take advice from a range of experts, whether that be legal experts, surveyors if it was a property matter, for example, HR advisors if it's a personnel matter. And in fact, in a lot of circumstances, we would expect trustees to take professional advice to inform their decision making. But ultimately, it is the trustees who make the decisions and the trustees who are accountable. So we can't tell you what the correct decisions to make are. Obviously, there's a wide range of charities doing a wide range of things, but we can provide and do provide, linked to at the bottom of this slide, a framework for decision making. So a framework for you to look at how do you make a good decision about a particular thing. So what are the key things that trustees need to consider when they're making decisions is risks. So we'll move on to talk about trustees and managing risks. And safeguarding risks are something that all charity trustees need to be alert to. And whilst all charities face a range of different risks, Buddhist charities and other faith charities may have some factors that make them particularly vulnerable to safeguarding risks. So we'll have a look at these. So they are often run by volunteers, perhaps more so than other types of charity. And volunteers, whilst their work and their time is greatly appreciated and the whole sector would fall without them, they may have less time for oversight than paid staff. People lead busy lives, have lots of other responsibilities. So again, it's important that trustees set an organisational culture that prioritises safeguarding so that everybody knows what's expected of them and will help to make sure that a safe environment is created for all. Secondly, faith and Buddhist charities may often be open door in nature, which is great and kind of what you'd expect from a faith-run organisation. But how do you safeguard against harm whilst operating that type of policy? We would advise you to take advice from safeguarding specialists, either internal or external, or safeguarding organisations on how specifically your organisation can mitigate and manage the risk that this type of issue presents. Thirdly, Buddhist charities are often a lot about rehabilitation, redemption, forgiveness. Those are often key aspects of faith, but all can have associated safeguarding risks that need to be identified and appropriately managed. And similarly, trust. A lot of people of faith may consider that trust is a key part of their religious duty, and we're not saying don't trust people, it's human nature. But unfortunately, not all people can be trusted. And as we've seen time and time again, people will abuse trust. So you need to be mindful of opportunities for people to harm others and your faith charity and what you can do to remove or at least minimise these opportunities. So do trust, but don't trust blindly. Make sure that you have checks and balances in place to reduce that risk of harm. Another aspect that we've touched on briefly before is spiritual authority. So some people may have spiritual authority within a Buddhist organisation, and adherents may consider religious leaders to be untouchable or superior or unchallengeable in some way. But nobody is above the law, and causing harm to people is still wrong, whoever you are. It doesn't depend on your status. So trustees cannot turn a blind eye if safeguarding issues are raised, no matter who they are raised about. And the final factor to consider is that relationships often continue outside a place of worship or a faith organisation. We've seen that increasingly over the COVID times with a lot of services moving online, Zoom prayer meetings, WhatsApp groups, etc. to provide support. But how are you supporting and ensuring that staff, volunteers and beneficiaries are aware of the boundaries and what is and is not appropriate behaviour? Sadly, abuse of all types affects all faiths, and therefore trustees need to have good oversight of safeguarding. Religious organisations, as we've seen, are not immune to safeguarding incidents, and we can see that they do have some features that may make them more vulnerable. It's useful to remember that some abusers will actually seek out organisations where safeguarding is not robust and where the opportunity to abuse and get away with it are presented. So what sort of risks are there with regard to safeguarding? Obviously, it will change and depend on the type of charity that you're operating, the activities that you're doing, and the people that you're working with. But the next slide just shows us a few examples of things to consider. So there's a big list of ones here. I'm not going to touch on them all, but just to flag out a few of the ones that perhaps are a bit more prominent at the moment. So we've got sexual harassment, abuse and exploitation, and obviously the ICSA inquiry into sexual abuse in religious settings has highlighted a lot around that. Domestic abuse is one that comes up. So if somebody brings to you an issue of domestic abuse, how is your charity going to handle that? And finally, another one perhaps in the news a bit more of late is bullying and harassment. And that we often think about being with regard to staff, but it can also affect volunteers and beneficiaries. So trustees need to think about and identify all the safeguarding risks that could apply to their charity. And a risk register is a really useful tool to record the risks that you identify, to review them and to help you to monitor them. So what do we as the Commission expect of trustees with regard to risk? Nice little diagram here, very simplistic, but very appropriate. So we expect trustees to identify and manage risks. You can't manage a risk that you haven't identified. So identifying and managing the possible and probable risk that a charity may face is a key part of good governance for charities of all sizes and complexities. And then we expect the risk versus the effort to be proportionate. So the higher the risk, the higher the effort that you need to put in. So significant risks need to be known and monitored, and trustees need then to be able to make informed decisions and take timely actions in response. And it doesn't matter if you're a small charity or a huge one. If there are opportunities for harm to come to your beneficiaries due to your charity's work, then you must manage those risks appropriately. It will be proportionate though, and you will have different risks depending on contact with the public. Will likely have less risks to manage than a Buddhist charity that hosts residential retreats, and one that hosts residential retreats that are aimed at perhaps more vulnerable people, like those with mental health issues or rehabilitation or addiction issues, will again have greater risks once more to manage. So we've said that the greater the risk, the higher the effort we expect from trustees, but what are we talking about specifically when it comes to safeguarding risks? Next slide, please. This is a bit of a list about the expectations we have on you, but just do bear in mind, we realise that trustees are volunteers, and we realise that, you know, you're trying to do your best. You're not professionals, so we will take that into account when things go wrong. But these are the expectations that we have, and Sarah and I were talking briefly about them earlier and saying it's quite a long list, but actually we looked at them all and we couldn't think that any of them are not reasonable expectations. So we expect trustees to make sure that their charity has appropriate safeguarding policies and procedures in place. We expect that they will know how to spot and handle safeguarding concerns in a full and open manner, that they will set out risks and how they will be managed in a risk register, which is regularly reviewed. We expect that the charity will check that people are suitable to act in their roles, and Sarah will go into how you do that in a bit more detail later on. We expect that the charity will have a clear system of referring or reporting to relevant agencies as soon as concerns are suspected or identified, and that the charity follows statutory guidance, good practice guidance and legislation relevant to their charity. Furthermore, we expect that the charity will not ignore harm or downplay failures, and Sarah will talk about an inquiry in a little while where that happened, and it's not something we would expect or accept from trustees. We'd expect the charity has a balanced trustee board and does not let one trustee dominate its work. Trustees, as we've said, should work together and make collective decisions. So even if you have, as you should, a designated trustee who is there for safeguarding matters, they still need to keep all the other trustees informed. The other trustees need to be aware of safeguarding as an issue and to make decisions collectively. Charity should make sure that protecting people from harm is central to its culture, and that it has enough resources, including trained staff, volunteers and trustees, for safeguarding and protecting people. And finally, that it conducts periodic reviews of safeguarding policies, procedures and practice. They shouldn't be things that sit gathering dust on a shelf. You know, the context and the risks are constantly changing that you have to deal with. We've talked about COVID and things moving online. Have you checked that your policies and procedures have been updated to deal with that? Constant monitoring is really essential. You also need to take into account the context within which you're operating, and for some of you, I know not all of you, that may be that you're operating or sending funds to support work overseas, and in that case there will be a few additional things that you need to be aware of. So excuse me, you need to Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. When safeguarding internationally, there are a few extra things to think about. So we expect charities in that case to endeavour to uphold the same practices and standards as in the UK. In circumstances where they deviate from normal best practice, trustees must be able to explain why taking the decision was a reasonable and justifiable course of action. So, for example, we have had a charity contact us to say, we've had a safeguarding incident, we're operating in X country, and we have risk assessed and decided that actually if we report this to the authorities in that country, to the police, then the victim will actually be at greater risk of harm than if we do not. We've therefore taken the decision not to report it to the police there. However, we have reported it to relevant agencies in the UK. So they're setting out and they've done a risk assessment of why they've made that decision that doesn't necessarily follow normal good practice. Charities should take reasonable steps to ensure that any partner they use upholds practices and standards to the fullest extent possible. And we've included an FCDO link there on due diligence and how you look at that in terms of safeguarding for external partners. Trustees should consider each set of circumstances in the environment that they take place. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about things like the specific environment, so that be the country that you're operating in, perhaps the region within that country, or even the town or the village. But it might also include things like the context, whether it's a school, a hospital, a place of worship that you're working in. Just to clarify, the Charity Commission has no jurisdiction over organisations operating internationally that are not English or Welsh charities. So it is the English or Welsh charity that we will look to in terms of setting standards and the processes and procedures. So in the example we gave before, where you've deviated from good practice, the final thing there to think about is that in such circumstances, trustees must consider and implement any additional steps required to ensure that safeguarding risks are removed or minimised. So that's whistle stop store. There are also additional checks and different checks for operating internationally in terms of volunteers and staff. So Sarah will talk about those briefly in her session on checks. But that's a whistle-stop overview of trustees' safeguarding duties and the Commission's expectations with regard to safeguarding risks. On the next slide, you'll see that we've pulled together all the links and resources that we think might be useful with regard to what I've just been talking about. I've talked about a lot of the steps that you can take to prevent things from going wrong. However, we do appreciate that even with the best will in the world, things can and still do happen. So I'm now going to hand over to Sarah to talk to you next about when things do go wrong and how the Commission deals with safeguarding incidents when they happen. Sarah.
Right, thanks, Colette. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on a Saturday morning. Sorry, the sun's streaming in now, just when it's time for me to speak. So hopefully it's not too distracting. Looking a bit like a Picasso painting at the moment, so I'm sorry about that. So now I'm going to give you an example of a commission inquiry into a faith organisation. So this is the most formal of our regulatory engagement. We've got many different levels of engagement, though, with charities. We have things like action plans where we'll set out some steps that can help you get you on the right track, stuff like that. But this is our most serious form of engagement because it reflects the seriousness of what occurred in this charity. And what it did was identified some really serious failures within the trustee leadership of this charity. So provide you with a bit more detail. So what went wrong and what happened as a result? So allegations of abuse were made by beneficiaries alleged to have taken place over a number of years. The trustees did not take appropriate action or report this to the Commission. And when the Commission got involved, the charity commissioned, so it gets very confusing, the charity commissioned its own independent investigation. And then the charity's own investigation found evidence of abuse and that senior individuals in the charity were previously aware of these allegations but failed to act. And due to the findings of the internal report, the Commission opened an inquiry. And we see this time and time again. If trustees fail to fulfil their duty of care, either through not having any safeguarding procedures in place or failing to act when confronted with incidents of harm, then people are harmed and we will have to get involved. And it's that thing, isn't it? There's no such thing as an innocent bystander. If you're in a position where people are looking to you to support and help, if something goes wrong and you don't do that, then even on a moral basis, that's not right. Also, the ICSA, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, identified some really difficult issues within the faith sector. So we're not just singling you out, but, you know, I don't think it's that people in general don't want to be involved with safeguarding. I think they either don't know how or don't feel it's relevant to them. But as we see from this investigation and from investigations that come up time and time again, and as Colette said, place of worship, faith organisations, faith charities aren't immune, unfortunately. So the Commission opened an inquiry under the Charities Act 2011 to establish and investigate the seriousness of the allegations, the extent to which the charity provided a safe environment, the failure to report serious incidents, governance concerns, and public trust and confidence concerns. So we have there's not many of us at the Commission, but we have a real dedicated team of investigators who will work tirelessly to get to the bottom of any issue that arises. And with serious incidents, a lot of resources put into making sure that we do it fairly and we do it effectively. So as a result of this inquiry, the Commission concluded that there was mismanagement and misconduct in the administration of the charity, and that former trustees did indeed fail to respond to and manage safeguarding concerns, and that their failure to create a safe culture within the charity exposed beneficiaries to harm. And remember, we are considering the charity law aspects, as Colette said previously. We're not a safeguarding body or a prosecuting body. So those aspects of the situation were and in the future will be dealt with other authorities such as the local authority and the police. And the impact, I mean, we've got a general impact of what happens with these cases, with these real serious safeguarding incidents and where trustees have failed to act. And it happened in this case, and it's happened in cases before, and unfortunately will perhaps happen in cases, you know, as we go on. But the Commission permanently disqualified trustees in this case, and we can and we will do that if we see fit. Interim managers can be appointed, and interim managers were appointed here. Interim managers are someone that we have drafted in that we think can sort the situation out for you, which is good for your beneficiaries, but is a real demonstration of a lack of trust in the trustee board. So I would think that the fact that you're here today means that you're keen to avoid that. And public trust and confidence can be severely affected, and reputational damage will have to be repaired. And we know that we've seen it in the media, we've seen where things go wrong, particularly within charities. People won't want to be involved. People will think that you don't have their best interests at heart, and in turn, the people that you wanted to work with, to help, won't get that help because you won't be getting donations, or you won't be able to operate in the way that you want to. And I think what we tend to forget when we do safeguarding training and when it feels like a paper exercise, but it really isn't, because what happens at the end of this is that lives are severely impacted. You know, there are people who have come out of this completely traumatized, and imagine how that trauma is then compounded by the fact that you've taken issues to trustees and they did nothing about it. And so I'm not telling you off. I mean, I'm very pleased that you're here today on a Saturday, but, you know, I just want to be clear that when things go wrong, they really do go wrong, and how important it is to make sure that you have robust policies and procedures in place, and that you do foster that culture of, you know, of having everyone's best interests at heart within your charity. So that leaves me rather seamlessly on to how can your organisation avoid these types of incidents, or at least reduce the risk. So it all comes down to mostly policies, procedures and practices that you need to have. And again, just want to be clear, this isn't safeguarding training. We're just providing a basic framework for you to then build on, create, and something that really reflects your charity, because you're also different, and you want something that you know encapsulates what you do and make sure that what you're doing is done as safely as possible. So adults at risk, I think it's just important. It gets really confusing, I think, even for me who works with this stuff day in, day out, that the definitions of things get a bit tricky. So I've just put these in here for when you have a copy of the slides, you can refer to this if you need to. But again, just to reiterate that we do expect you to be looking after and have the best interest of everybody who comes into contact with your charity at the forefront of everything that you do. But there are particular groups of people who you may need to manage the risks, that there are higher risks when working with them. So safeguarding duties for adults at risk apply to any charity working with anyone aged over 18 who has needs for care and support, is experiencing or is at risk of abuse or neglect, and as a result of those care and support needs is unable to protect themselves from either the risk of or the experience of abuse or neglect. And so just provided some examples on the side, because even then it's a bit like, okay, I'm not sure what that means. So it could look like someone having an illness affecting their mental or physical health, having a learning disability, suffering from drug or alcohol problems. And having spoken to Manisha, I think for a lot of you, you're working with rehabilitation, people on a spiritual journey of self-improvement, you probably will be coming across a lot of people who have suffered from drug or alcohol problems. And finally, they could be frail, whether that's through illness or old age. And we've got links at the bottom here for more information around that definition. Children, I think they're probably the most self-explanatory, anyone under the age of 18. But I think it's important just to reiterate here what it means to safeguard children. So the NSBCC have laid out here that it means to protect children from abuse and maltreatment, prevent harm to children's health or development, ensure children grow up with the provision of safe and effective care, and take action to enable all children and young people to have the best outcomes. And just something that will help on the side of this slide is so any charity working with or coming into the contact with anyone under the age of 18, that's who safeguarding duties apply to. And so please use the NSPC resources. They're absolutely brilliant and really, really clear. And I've linked those there and also at the bottom of the slide. So here comes the exciting bit. This is about what we would expect to see. So the first bit is your safeguarding policy statement. So this sets out what your organisation will do to keep people who come into contact with it safe from harm. So this is like a commitment. This is you having a written commitment to the people who you are serving, to people who you are working with, your staff, volunteers. You expressing your commitment to how you're going to keep them safe. Also, on an administrative side, some insurers will likely ask you for your safeguarding policy statement and safeguarding policy. So it's just something to bear in mind. So your safeguarding policy statement should set out your organisation's commitment to protecting those who come into contact with your charity, as I've just said, the more detailed policies and procedures your organisation will put in place, and how you'll keep those who come into contact with your charity safe from harm. So it should all be about your organisation, should be tailored to your organisation. But the most important thing is that it's fit for purpose. So we don't want you to just take one of the templates of a website and say, oh, that will do, because people are going to look at it and think, well, that's got nothing to do with what we're doing. Why have we got a policy on trips, taking trips when we don't go anywhere? So really make sure that it's tailored to your organisation. Put some effort into it. I mean, I assume all of you have done already, but if you're looking at this and thinking, oh gosh, we've got some work to do, then please use our guidance. It's really good that you're here today. Take your time over it, really put a great deal of effort into it. And having a well thought through safeguarding policy, it really demonstrates that your organisation values the people that you come into contact with. And it is essential that everyone knows that there is a policy and who to ask about it. It's not like you need to hand a copy to everybody who walks through the door, but just have it somewhere available, put it on your website or have it pinned up on a board in any premises that you're using. So if we move on to safeguarding and child protection procedures, so these are detailed guidelines and instructions that support your safeguarding policy statement. So it's a bit like a GCSE exam. This is, what and how. So the statement is your commitment, and then this is how you're actually going to do it. So they should explain how you will protect people from harm, make sure people can raise safeguarding concerns, handle allegations or incidents, and respond, including reporting to the relevant authorities. Again, the amount of detail in your policy depends on what your charity does, where it works, where it operates, or whether it's in person or online, and the level of risk, of course. And please use the guidance to help with your policies and procedures. I've got loads of links at the end of this section, so please use them. And as Colette mentioned, take professional advice if you need it. It's not a weakness to ask for help. You know, it actually shows a great deal of strength and a great deal of commitment to wanting to get things right for your beneficiaries and your staff if you ask for help when you need it. Just another thing, this is new, we updated our safeguarding guidance recently. It's a lot better. So we have a code of conduct now. So this is just an example of, you know, what a code of conduct could look like within your organisation. So it should set out your charity's culture and values and how people in your charity should behave. You know, you could make a feature of it. Again, you could have it displayed on your premises, have it on your website. You know, like a school has an ethos. It's something that people know, this is what's expected of us, and this is how I'm going to represent this organisation, this charity. And again, more links at the bottom of this slide for support on this. And finally, just to run through a few more things, just when you do get a copy of this slide, you've got these to hand. You also need to make sure that your charity has a complaints process for users and others with concerns, suitable health and safety arrangements in place, first aid, fire safety and digital safety policies that everybody understands, and welfare, discipline and whistleblowing policies for staff if you have them. So just a roundup of what your policies and procedures should look like and what we'd expect them to look like. So they should be put into practice, responsive to change. I'm sure things have definitely changed for all of us during the COVID-19 pandemic. So did you have to change your safeguarding policies, particularly around online safety? And are you reviewing them as necessary? I mean, at least once a year, we'd expect you to be, you know, getting it out, having a look. Does this, you know, have we changed the way we do things? Are we planning on changing the way we do things? Does this need updating? Has society changed? Stuff like that. Obviously, it needs to be available to the public. Again, you're not handing it out, you know, to flyers for people on the street, but just, you know, if people go onto your website, if they're thinking about joining your order, then they've got, you know, they can see your commitment to keeping them safe, and they'll think, oh yes, I'm interested. And it must be compliant with all relevant legislation. So make sure you keep up to speed with what's happening with the laws and stuff like that, DBS checks, things like that. Again, it's not safeguarding training, but we have, with our much better safeguarding guidance online, we have updated our online safety. This is us being responsive to change as well, because so many activities moved online. We can't tell you exactly what to do, but again, I've got a link at the bottom to people who can help. But we've identified the 3 C's. We love C's at the Charity Commission here. The first one is content. So does your charity have adequate control over its website and social media accounts? Who can post information, and is all content suitable for your charity? Contact, so how do people talk to each other when using your online services, and how do you keep users safe? Do people need passwords to access services? Stuff like that. We've seen some really awful stuff in the news where people have hijacked Zoom meetings with pornographic material or racist, xenophobic material. That's a safeguarding breach, because, you know, poor people on that Zoom call have seen something really disgusting or really traumatic that's going to stay with them. So, you know, how are you protecting people from that type of harm? And conduct. So how do you monitor what people say, do and share when using your services? So please use that link if you need some more advice on that. Again, won't go into too much detail here, or any detail at all for this slide, but this is just another roundup of links for the end of the section. Now we're going to vetting potential trustees, staff and volunteers. This is all about safer recruitment. I'm getting blinded by the sun here, but I'll persevere. So this is about how are you making sure the people who want to be part of your charity, part of your organisation, how are you making sure that they're suitable? So you must make sure that trustees, staff and volunteers are legally able to act in their positions and suitable for their positions. It's again, like any job interview, you know, you want to make sure someone's the right fit for you. And if you are taking on new trustees, staff or volunteers, you should always follow safe recruitment procedures. So safe recruitment procedures look like having references, job history, identity documents, criminal record checks, and overseas checks if relevant. I think it's really important here because I know a lot of faith organisations have operated on, word of mouth, people coming in from the community or friends and stuff getting involved to help on day-to-day running. But you must make sure that you are, even if it's someone you've known for years, that they, that you've gone through a robust vetting process to make sure that, they're safe to be working in your organisation. And some people think that getting a DBS check is the be all and end all, whether they've got no criminal record, so they should be fine. No, you need to make sure that you've done every part of all of these steps, and not to bring him up, he who must not be named, but Jimmy Savile, he would have had a completely clean DBS check. So you need to make sure that you are following all the steps. So yeah, don't see it as it's just another thing to do. It really does make a difference. In completing these checks are vital. So if there is a serious incident which could have been avoided through doing a proper vetting process, then the Charity Commission, the police even, are going to want to know, why didn't you follow those the proper vetting process? You've exposed people to harm. Okay, so this, I'm sure all of you are aware that sometimes the DBS check, getting DBS checks can be quite confusing at times. And obviously we're the Charity Commission, and I know that the DBS check are really working hard to make things better, but I can't give you a detailed rundown of how to navigate the service, but I can help. So hopefully this will provide some support, and I've also got a link at the bottom here, which is quite close to my heart because I worked with my other colleague with the DBS and Strengthening Faith Institutions to create a DBS checker specific for faith centres. So we talked to different faith groups, found out what the different types of roles are, typical different types of roles there are within the organisations, and we've given a sort of general idea of what level of check that role would be eligible for. So please do check that out. So we as a commission expect that trustees should risk assess all roles, taking into account the working environment to determine if they're eligible for a check, and if so, at what level. Always get a standard enhanced or enhanced with barred list check from the DBS when a role is eligible for one. So not all roles working with children or adults at risk are eligible for a standard or enhanced check, and you should get a basic check if your risk assessments determine it's appropriate. So I think that one of the main takeaways from that is if everyone can get a basic DBS check, so you might as well get one. I think the issue here is, why wouldn't you? If it's available to you, then why would you not get it? It's part of that safe recruitment, demonstrating that you have a commitment to keeping people safe. Finally, on this section, or second to last, we've got overseas checks. So I've just quite plainly put here, read guidance on getting checks for people from overseas. We've got a link there. It's quite complicated. It's not complicated, but it's too much for us to go into today. It's got some really good links to more guidance as well in there, so please check that out if it's relevant to you. You can join the misconduct disclosure scheme to get extra checks on international staff. And when sending workers overseas, where you can't get a DBS check for someone, then you may be able to get an international child protection certificate, and have a link there as well for where you can find out more information. Finally, trustee checks. So you need to obtain a declaration from the prospective trustee that they are not disqualified, and consult the official registers of disqualified persons. And those links are there below for you to check out. And again, just another slide with useful links. So I won't spend too much time on that. It's just for you to check that out when we send you a copy of the slides. So finally, we're going to talk about reporting incidents of harm. It's a key part of your trustee duties. You must report any serious incidents that happen in connection with your charity's activities to the relevant authorities. And obviously, as you can see from the previous inquiry, failure to do so can have really serious ramifications for you and your charity. So there are 4 things that the Charity Commission would class as serious incidents, but obviously we're on a safeguarding webinar, so we presume that safeguarding incidents would fall under harm to people who come into contact with your charity, harm or harm to your charity's work or reputation. Got a bit of a break from the sun now, thank goodness. Oh no, it's back. Apologies. Right, so as well as to the police or any other relevant authority, you need to make a report to the Commission if a serious safeguarding risk materialises, and this will usually be if any of the following occur. So this could be incidents of harm or mistreatment, alleged or actual, of beneficiaries of the charity, adults or children, doesn't matter, which have resulted in or risk significant harm to them and happened while they were under the care of the charity. If someone connected with the charity, for example, a trustee, staff member or volunteer, was responsible for the harm or mistreatment of someone who came into contact with the charity and has resulted in or risks significant harm to them and are connected to the charity's activities, and breaches of procedures or policies at the charity which have put people who come into contact with it through its work at significant risk of harm. And that includes, again, a good example of this would be not providing a proper vetting check for new members of staff. Can be quite difficult though to figure out what's a serious incident. As a link here to our a chart, we've got just examples of what would be a serious incident and what wouldn't be a serious incident. However, what I would like to say is, if in doubt, report. So if you think, oh, it's not, I don't know, just report it. It's better to say something than to not say something at all. And at the Commission, we're not going to say, you know, oh gosh, why they sent us this? We're going to say, oh, okay, that's all right. We think you can handle that. We can leave that with you. Thank you for letting us know. Or alternatively, we'll say, no, we might need to help you with that. That sounds pretty intense, pretty serious. So let's offer you a bit of support with that incident. So we've got 3 clear steps on what to do if an incident, from the Charity Commission's perspective, of what to do if a serious incident is to arise within your place of worship. So report to the relevant authorities, follow our guidance, and use the online form. So all of the links are there for you to check out after this. And we've got a really good online form which helps you to capture all the most relevant details that can help us to assess whether we think you can handle it or whether we need to step in. And this is another just a link for information. The Office for Civil Society have provided some really excellent guidance on handling safeguarding allegations in a charity. So check that out. It's super useful. I looked at it. It's really, really clear. So I really recommend checking that out after the webinar. Finally, safeguarding incidents overseas. So any incident which is not reported overseas would still need to be reported to all relevant authorities in the UK, including submitting a serious incident report to the Charity Commission. And where a British national or person with claim to British residency has committed or potentially committed child sexual abuse or exploitation overseas, this should still be reported to the National Crime Agency in the UK. And we have another useful link there with lots of information around that. Okay, you made it to the end. Hopefully we haven't gone over time too much. We've got about 8 minutes for questions now. But I just want to throw in here that we have updated our previous faith and good governance guidance, and it's now called Managing Faith Charities as Trustees. And we've just made some really excellent differences. My colleague Ros worked on this, and it's less than 4,000 words in length. It used to be 35 pages long. It was like reading War and Peace. So it's much easier to read, and some really clear subheadings and stuff. So I'd really recommend checking that out just to help on your day-to-day running of your charity. And then finally, I won't go into this, but these are just the 10 actions trustee boards need to take to ensure good safeguarding governance. So bring this out at your annual meetings, at your trustee meetings, just to make sure you're covering all of those bases. So we shall move on to questions now, if there are any. I haven't seen any yet.
Thank you very, very much. No, we've got quite a lot of questions, and I think that's really wonderful to hear from you both, Colette and Sarah. There's a lot there. Thank you. I'd just like to say that apart from you being so brilliant in covering everything, it's been a pleasure working with you both. and on this common project. So thank you very much for the hard work and for offering to do this for us. I have got a string of questions here. I don't think we're going to be able to accept any more in the time we've got available. So if you could stop sending them in now, that would be great. Although you can still submit them afterwards, I'm sure. So let's see now. We've got, is the best way to log adequate monitoring? I can hear you, Colette. Is the best way to log adequate monitoring of safeguarding, for example, annual review of policies and procedures in trustee minutes, trustee meeting minutes?
So I would say that is one way of logging them. So the Commission, as you gathered, every charity is different, and we don't prescribe the specific safeguarding procedures and arrangements that you need to take as an individual charity. That's for the trustees to decide what is the best way that's going to work for you. So it may be that you do it in minutes, it may be that you do it in a risk register. And I think a risk register is something that we sort of say you should have, so that may be one way of doing it. There's a whole range. There are tools out there that you can log safeguarding things with. The tool that Sarah showed you in her slides with the pink background, you can capture an awful lot of information about safeguarding issues in there. So there's a whole range. I think it's about you as trustees looking at the specific circumstances of your organisation and working out what works best for you. Sarah, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah, I think that you covered most of that.
There is the point about data protection. Obviously, trustees' minutes shouldn't include any details of cases. Those are
yes, however you record it, you obviously need to take your GDPR considerations in place. And I think that's something that the tool that we showed you helps with that, about giving you guidance on who to disclose what to and things as well.
Thank you. I just want to say before you go on, quite a lot of the questions that are coming in are the kinds of things that I'm speaking personally as a safeguarding officer here, not for the charities or the Charity Commission. 318 I have found can answer a lot of the questions that are coming in here, and I'll put their address in the chat in a minute. They specialise in safeguarding for faith groups. Could the Charity Commission recommend some good examples of public-facing policy statements? That's the next question.
I suspect the answer is no.
I'm having to turn my video off because I'm breaking.
Oh, okay.
I'm having some
people on the call might want to turn the video.
I can't hear it. It broke up as soon as you said Sarah. I didn't hear anything.
Manisha, would you like to repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. The question is, can the Charity Commission recommend some good examples of public-facing policy statements? And Colette's short answer was probably no.
I think, again, along the lines that you said, Manisha, there are a lot of safeguarding organisations out there like 318, like the NSPCC, that can help you with policy statements and policies themselves, provide templates, etc., training, guidance, specific advice. But a bit like Sarah said in her presentation, it is about it being fit for purpose for your specific organisation. And I think that's why it's difficult for us to advise, because every charity is going to be different. And so what's good for one charity might not necessarily be good for another charity.
Thank you. I've just had a message from Sarah saying that her connection has gone wrong, so she can't actually hear anything. So we also have a question here about, you mentioned domestic abuse. Do you mean by this internal domestic abuse within a charity, or that reported by a beneficiary that is happening at their home?
I think it could refer to either. Obviously, again, different faith charities operate differently. Sometimes you will have people who are either spiritual leaders or employees of a faith organisation that perhaps work on the premises or are provided with accommodation through the charity itself because of their role, and you may find a domestic abuse situation occurring there. Alternatively, we have had reports where incidences and examples where perhaps a member of a congregation or adherents have come to the charity for support with a domestic abuse situation, and it's the organisation needing to know, you know, how they handle that, how they respond appropriately in those situations. So again, I think it's about that point we made about identifying the possible risks that could be presented in your particular circumstances, and then looking at how you would mitigate them.
Thank you. So thank you very, very much, Colette and Sarah.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you for having us, and thank you to everybody for giving up their time to listen to us.
Well, it was a pleasure. It's a really important topic. So thank you very much. I'd just like to finish by inviting you, if you'd like to. There's absolutely no pressure whatsoever. This is a free event, but should you wish to make a donation for the work of the NBO in general, you're very, very welcome, and the link is there. But